Evening, everybody, and thanks for joining us for the 21st episode of Soccer Scene with myself and Noel O'Connor. Noel, plenty to digest following the weekend's action. Just for Treaty alone, there was plenty of action, 2 games over the weekend for every Airtricity First Division club. So, I suppose varying results-wise, Noel, you have Galway on the Friday, a great draw, 0-0 draw against Galway, obviously one of the title challengers right up there with Cork City, a good defensive display on the night. Then you fast forward, obviously, to Monday evening. We knew it was going to be a tough encounter anyway, because judging by the 2 previous encounters with Cork City, 5-0 defeat and 4-0 down at half time. So a really tough one to take for the team and the supporters on Monday evening. What's your own reaction, and I suppose your opinion on both performances?
Very nice performance against Galway. You know, they were very cohesive as a group. I thought the body language was good, the energy was good. We have to give a bit of credit to Jason O'Connor with the 4-4-2. He said it the last day they played above in Galway that maybe they should have gone 4-4-2, which they did do in the last 15 minutes and nearly nicked a point. Because as we know, John Cobh, can be a very conservative manager. And when he saw Enda Kern and Dean George up front, he certainly kept a couple of extra bodies back in the Galway half, which certainly helped Treaty a lot. No, listen, it was very good. A couple of smart saves, like they were full value to the point. You know, it wasn't a kind of backs to the wall or anything like that. They had a couple of chances themselves, and it was quite comfortable overall.
Certainly was, and as I said, the Cork City game. Then you go. Obviously, you're probably full of confidence in some ways defensively. And you're going in against a team that are now top of the league leaders again, fairly free scoring throughout the season, full of creativity. And then as well for Treaty, you have to play 3 of your starting midfielders, Noel, in defensive positions, on top of Callum McNamara and Jack Lynch, who were part of that Galway game, playing in the defensive area. You had Lee Devitt due to the absence of Mark Ludden at left full. So it was, the signs were probably ominous, I suppose, because there wasn't much time to really go over anything with that back 5. Yeah,
and the flip side of that is you had 4 of the same back 5 starting as started on Friday night against Galway, and guys who acquitted themselves very well. We certainly thought that Callum McNamara and Shane Gearns played very well on Friday night. Look, it's the nature of that league. You're not going to be able to put out the same team every week, for various reasons, suspensions and knocks and injuries and that. In fairness to Mark Ludden, like he's been virtually an ever-present, I think. They rested him there last season when they had already qualified for the playoffs. So there was one change from the back 5 that played on Friday night. And look, it's not really to be dwelling on the back 5, because overall I thought the performance was really disappointing, and you hear about, player fatigue, or they might get tired, but like they didn't run around even enough to get tired, I felt, you would expect them maybe to put up a real fight, maybe till 60 or 65 minutes and then kind of run out of steam because of the exertions of the 2 games. But I thought right from the first few minutes, Cork totally dictated the game, got into their passing mode, and all over the pitch they seemed to have acres of time and acres of space already and loads of time to do whatever they want to do, and there was no bit of press on them or any bit of hassling or harrying them. They seemed to have the freedom of the park, and that's how the game started, and it just continued in that frame for the whole 95 minutes.
It certainly seemed to, and I suppose the one thing you can't do, Noel, against the Cork City team or anyone challenging for the league, especially if you are planning on just sticking into the game as long as you can, is concede an early goal. Now, Treaty did concede more than just 1 early goal, and Tommy did allude to how disappointing it was to concede such sloppy goals. That has been a feature, I suppose, Noel, this season. I did mention that only maybe last week or the week before, that we've already conceded, I think, 6 goals more this season in the whole of last season. I know they're 2 different seasons, but it just is a disappointing situation, I suppose, for the management to see that.
Yeah, I think, look, they're talking about sloppy goals. Cork must have had 15 or 18 chances. I did count 3 or 4 chances in the first 6 or 7 minutes of the second half that were equally as good as the ones they had in the first half, and they just didn't convert them. But I mean, I suppose like the biggest talking point for me, and I mentioned it a couple of weeks ago, when Jack Brady was left out for Conor Wynne, I said it was a tricky decision to make. You know, that you need to be 100% sure that certainly your second keeper is going to be up to the level and maybe beyond the level. We did see a couple of maybe errors from Jack Brady, but nothing really out of the ordinary. And what you didn't want to do is maybe be looking at your first choice keeper again after a couple of games. But certainly after last night, you know, I thought that Conor Wynne, he didn't have a great outing, and you know, there's no one ever 100% responsible for any goal, but there's certainly 3 of those goals that you'd really be having a big look. I felt his conditioning certainly needs to be a good bit better. And outside that, I think every single kick out he made went straight down the middle of the pitch for the whole 95 minutes. I can't, maybe 1 or 2 headers early in the game, Dean George won or got onto the ball, but other than that, it was really easy headers for the Cork City back 3 to win. And I certainly think that didn't help the treaty cause. So there's certainly a bit of food for thought there for Tommy in that situation in terms of the goalkeeping position. And it's obviously a very crucial position.
That certainly is. And I know that apparently it was agreed on in a few weeks in advance that Conor Wynne would get game time. I suppose some people may say that maybe the plan was to bring in Jack Brady after the Galway game. I'm not so sure. Obviously, with Conor Wynne keeping a clean sheet, you can understand the decision to keep him in there. I personally think, Noel, coming into the game against Cobh, I do think Jack Brady will start. What do you think yourself?
Yeah, I think it's, you know, I'm obviously not familiar with the inner workings of what's going on in the dressing room, but I think, you know, if I was there now, I certainly would still see Jack Brady as the number 1 keeper there. As I said, you know, he's had a couple of wobbles, for want of a better word, but nothing really out of the ordinary. And, you know, from what I've seen last night, I certainly think that, you know, and probably for the back 4 as well, they'd probably like to see him back in on Friday night.
And I suppose if there was one positive to take from Monday night, Noel, I know that you know one of the players that did come on from your time with the Kennedy Cup squad 3 years ago, Darren Noenko, who came on as a second half substitute, and Scott Kirkland came on as a second half substitute as well from the underage sides with Treaty. Darren Noenko, only 17 years old as well. Is that something you'd like to see more of from now to the end of the season? Because it is a hard juggling act, isn't it, Noel, really, whether you want to really build the team with underage players to try and get them the experience, because going side by side with that, you also need to keep getting results on a regular enough basis anyway at first division level. Yeah,
I think so. Look, it was great to see them. Great to see Darren get in. He certainly made great strides as a Kennedy Cup player and has continued in that frame since he went to Treaty. He certainly filled out. He's certainly a big physical boy as well for 17. I think it's important that, and you know, we do get this message out about training and players don't have time to train. I hope the same isn't true for the likes of the 2 young guys who came on last night. I think they should be training at least four days a week in terms there of their conditioning and strength, and also their running. Would I like to see players like that? Absolutely. You know, we're kind of looking for a clear message coming from the club, and sometimes it's a little bit mixed about what they're about. If it's to harness, you know, the local talent in the Midwest, well, the best way for those guys to improve is by playing games. I see Joe Gorman is missing off the last 2 team sheets, so we'd have to assume that he's gone.
We are waiting confirmation, Noel, but it does seem to be the case that Joe Gorman will depart.
Yeah, and I don't think he's left a big legacy in Treaty. And maybe if Darren Noenko had an extra 8 or 10 games under his belt, you know, would they be in a much worse position? I don't think so. I think Tommy has alluded to the fact that, you know, the only games they've lost is to the top 3, and I think, you know, he wouldn't be. I think he's more than capable of dealing with, you know, the front players outside that top 3. So it would be nice to see that. And look, if there is going to be a future there, these guys need games under their belts.
You alluded to it already, Noel, but I was going to bring that up. Joe Gorman, we mentioned recently, obviously Kieran Hanlon has departed as well, although the club haven't actually confirmed that yet. Charlie Fleming has also departed, as we know, that was publicised. Joe Gorman does seem, and Tommy was asked about it, and he didn't really deny that Joe Gorman was gone, but that is probably the worst kept secret around it appears at the moment. It's fair to say, Noel, from your own comment there, my own opinion as well, being honest with you, and the opinion of many Treaty supporters and probably the club and the player as well, that this move just didn't work out for anyone.
No, I don't think it did. I suppose at best I describe the attitude of him as a bit cavalier. I thought, and look, he'll probably look at the game last night and say, well, they probably could have done with me, and maybe he's right. But certainly on Friday night, I felt that, they were very cohesive and very together. I thought Shane Gearns looked kind of very uncharacteristically kind of ropey last night. I kind of mentioned it a couple of times in the first 10 or 15 minutes, but that's not something that you see too often, and hopefully that was just a blip for him. But he certainly didn't seem to enjoy to play next to Joe Gorman like that. That relationship between the players is very, very important. The personal relationship, when you're playing centre half, and I just didn't see any kind of bond between those two. So hopefully, they can bounce back from this and get a better result on Friday night.
And before we come to that game and our preview of that game on Friday, Noel, the July transfer window is upon us now soon. We know that Treaty won't be going out spending big money, that's for sure, and trying to attract players that way. I suppose the only way you can look at it is, can they manage to secure maybe a couple of loan players from League of Ireland Premier Division clubs? I know that might be difficult, because will the League of Ireland Premier Division club want to pay all the wage of a young player, even though they probably wouldn't be getting that much anyway? But that does look like the only option if Treaty can manage to secure a couple of players, as well as maybe some unearthed talent that we're unsure of from maybe the underage or junior ranks.
Yeah, look, I mentioned Tony Whitehead last week. I think there is a couple of lads around the town that are certainly worth a look at. Tommy has alluded to himself about guys wanting to stay in the league, and I'm sure there'll be a few guys released as well. And look, I certainly agree with you. The underage, particularly the under 19 in league in Dublin, is fairly strong. It's hard to believe that there wouldn't be a good player, say, from St. Pat's and Shamrock Rovers. I know Tommy be friendly with Stephen Bradley from his time with Limerick. I'm certainly someone like that, coming down with that attitude and that ambition. It wouldn't do the local lads any harm either, and certainly be a better bet than having someone like Joe Gorman around.
And the upcoming game with Cobh, it's a huge one now, Noel, given that we didn't mention earlier, but Wexford managed to get two really late goals in the last two games that they played, which got them 4 points from possibly only having one. It was huge for them. Puts them into the playoff place ahead of Treaty on goal difference. Obviously, the goal difference Treaty wasn't helped by the loss and the manner of the loss on Monday as well. Two games previously with Cobh, really tight games, 2 draws, 0-all, 2-all. There's an interesting subplot, a couple I suppose really, is that Shane Keegan, who was the Treaty Academy lead for 4 months, his first game in charge is going to be against Treaty for Cobh on Friday night after him being announced as the manager on Monday. And then as well, I was sent a picture where it was the worst kept secret obviously as well, where Charlie Fleming is now training with Cobh and possibly could be ready to play when it turns the 1st of July on Friday. So that would be interesting, and it's going to be, again, probably another tight game in that Coleman's Park pitch.
Yeah, look, it's, from where Treaty are now, there's a little bit of pressure on them as well. We alluded to Wexford. I think Wexford are in a really good position, obviously. Unlike Shane Keegan, Ian Ryan stuck to his principles and said that he'd stay with the club that, had given him a chance to come back into football. And I think they're certainly reaping the rewards. They've had 2 late goals in the last 3 or 4 games, which shows mentally they're certainly in a really good place. And I think they're going to give Treaty one hell of a fight for that 5th place, because with Longford beating Galway last night, it's unlikely that either the two of them are going to get close to the 4th place either. So it looks like a straight shootout between Treaty and Wexford. And it's, as I said, there's a little bit of pressure on Treaty, which hasn't been there before in terms of getting a result. Cobh is always difficult regardless of the manager. I'm not so sure about the manager's bounce. Charlie Fleming, I certainly wouldn't have been a big fan. We know he always has discipline problems against his ex clubs as well. So now he's another ex club to maybe to have a few discipline problems with. But I would think that it won't worry Treaty if Charlie Playing is playing, and certainly Jack Lynch looks to me like a way better option at right back than Charlie Fleming.
That brings us to the Treaty team, Noel, ourselves and our own preferences. We do know that Mark Ludden and Enda Curran set out the game on Monday night, and judging by Tommy's comments after the game, he's confident that both players will be fit for selection against Cobh, which would be vital, obviously, as well. It would also free Lee Devitt up, who did play well against Galway, to go back into midfield. Noel Custrain, that was another disappointment as well, I suppose, Noel, on Monday. He probably won't be playing, considering he went off in the first half. So you'd imagine Matt Keane get the nod there from the start if he wasn't going to anyway. What would be your preferred team, I suppose, Noel? Would you make many changes from the Galway game in particular, whatever about the Cork game?
Yeah, look, you'd like to see the side that and the shape of the side that went out against Galway again. Certainly, if they can put in a performance like that and an attitude like that, it'll be, I'm sure they'd be desperately disappointed if they only picked up a point, and they'd have a real chance of getting the 3, I think, with the quality of Enda Curran and Dean George. Thought Dean George was very isolated last night. No one seemed to get near him. And the 3 Cork centre halves had the freedom of the park. And I think with Enda Curran there, a little bit like with Galway United, they'd certainly have to be a bit more honest, Cobh, and they'd have to sit maybe 4 or 5 back there to take care of them, and that gives you a chance to to play on the front foot. So hopefully, what Tommy said, Mark Ludden back and Enda Curran back, they'll certainly give him a massive boost. And it's definitely roll up your sleeves time now, and every point is going to be vital. Wexford look to be on a real good rich vein of form, and it's important that Treaty match them, because it is going to be one hell of a fight for that 5th place.
Yes, absolutely, and we do hope that Treaty can manage to pick up the 3 points against Cobh on Friday, and we will be here to digest the action once more next week on what will promise to be another busy show for myself and Noel. So thank you for joining us this evening, everyone, and we hope to see you next week.